What is our purpose? What is our mission as entrepreneurs, as investors? When is enough? I think when we find that, then the answer to when is enough becomes clear. Until we find that, we can be stuck on that treadmill or that rat race. And so it's a challenge that I put out there for myself and for the fit investor community to think about it. When is enough? What is your purpose? What is your mission?
This is the Fit Investor Podcast, where we talk about how to live a more holistic life of being fit, not only financially, but physically and faithfully. We'll be joined by experts in all these areas to share their experiences and actionable and practical tips so that you can be a fit investor too. So now let's join our hosts, Cale Delaney and Brenna Carls.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Fit Investor. I'm your host, Cale Delaney, and today our very special guest is Cale Delaney. Imagine that, yours truly. So today we're going to do just a special episode here, just me solo, and wanted to just talk about something that in relation to entrepreneurship that I've been going through and that's on my mind. And I was just actually listening to another podcast this morning talking about some of this stuff, but I wanted to talk about the different stages and the struggles of entrepreneurship. So for those of you listening, you may or may not know my story, but just a real brief recap. I started out and working a 15-year career as ultimately as a senior project manager for a large contractor doing specialty concrete repair and restoration around the US. And I was never the type of person that thought that I would be an entrepreneur. I always flocked to safety, relatively risk averse, and I drank the Kool-Aid of what society teaches us of go to school, get a job, invest in your 401k IRA, and hope to retire at 65, 70 years old and eke out a living. That's what I was in, where most people are in. And around 2020-ish, beginning of 2020, and shortly after my youngest son was born, had the bit of a mindset shift, or a big mindset shift, really, in just looking for a way out of the rat race, so to speak, and settled on real estate through some stops and starts, ended up getting into short-term rentals, and in a very short period of time, was able to replace the income from the W-2 and ultimately leave that job and now focus on the real estate business full-time. And we've scaled it into several short-term rentals in Tennessee and Florida, co-hosting business, consulting and coaching business, as well as some other things. And so that is what I do. I do full-time now, and of course, along with the Fit Investor podcast. But all that because, again, I never thought that I would be an entrepreneur. I didn't think that I had the skill set, or that I didn't have the ambition for it, frankly. And now I've been full-time as a real estate investor and entrepreneur and running my business about a little over a year and a half since I left the W-2. And it's been a learning experience. Again, coming out of that W-2 world for 15 years certainly has a bit of a rude awakening in terms of what it means to build a business and be an entrepreneur. And so I want to share some of the realities of it, the good things, the bad things, and some of the stages of it and where I find myself. And this goes along with what I heard this morning on another podcast. It was actually the Better Life Tribe or Better Life podcast with Brandon Turner. And so I'm going to steal some of this from him. So thank you, Brandon Turner, who actually is going to be on the Fit Investor in a couple months. So that's exciting. But he broke it down really well, actually, into the 4 stages of entrepreneurship, more or less. And so it starts out with the DIY, right? And actually, let me preface that is he breaks that down into 4 stages, with each having their limit. And that's the important thing that he was getting across, is that each stage has its limit. And in order to grow, you need to progress from one stage to the next. And so it starts out with the DIY. And frankly, that's where most of us find ourselves in the beginning, because more or less out of a necessity, right? You have to bootstrap things. So that is certainly where I was in the beginning. I was working the W-2 and trying to build this business and doing everything all at the same time. And by nature, I'm a do-it-yourself type person because I still struggle with a bit of a scarcity mindset. And that's a whole nother thing that comes into play in the entrepreneurship world. But I'm the kind of person that growing up, if something's wrong with the car, you figure out how to fix it because you're not paying to bring it to a mechanic, right? Same thing. Something goes on wrong with the house, you're figuring out how to fix it so you don't have to hire somebody. And that's how I started out with the real estate too. And I started my investing in a local market here in South Florida. And I would be going over there to take care of anything when it comes up and spending a lot of time that I probably shouldn't have spent doing these things, whether it's a plumbing call, changing a toilet, or swapping a doorknob, or a lock, or this or that or the other thing. And this is actually one of the reasons that I prefer remote investing than local, because it forces you to build out your systems a bit more and rely on other people and not be as DIY. For me, it was a bit of a necessity because left to my own devices, I will still try to save a few bucks by doing it myself when the head knowledge says in the long run, in reality, you're actually costing yourself, right? But it's a hard habit to break. That's where we start out as a DIY investor or the DIY entrepreneur, right? And so you're doing everything yourself, you're wearing all the hats. And that is a great way to get started, right? Because you are going to know how to do everything. You're going to be the expert in building your business, whatever that may be, and all the different positions and roles that it's going to take. So that's great, but it has a limit, right? Because you only have so much time, you only have so much mental bandwidth to be able to handle things. So you're going to relatively quickly reach a point where you can't take on anymore, right? If it's just you. And so you're going to have to go to the next level, which is the project manager level. And again, I told you I worked a 15-year career as a project manager. So I'd like to think that I know project management very well. I will say, and maybe it's just me, but I doubt it, it's harder to transition. What's the right way to say it? I find it harder to apply those same skill sets and disciplines and delegation and all that stuff to my personal life and my personal business, than it was to my job. I was a great project manager. I told you I ended as a senior project manager. So senior level management, running multi-million-dollar projects, multiple multi-million-dollar projects across the country at the same time. And I did very well. I was one of the top producers, one of the top project managers for my branch. And especially towards the last couple of years when I was building this business while I was working, I learned how to delegate really well because it was a necessity. I didn't have the time or the bandwidth to manage everything, DIY, all those projects myself and build this business. So I was being a great project manager for my job and DIYing my business at the same time. And getting into the project manager level allows you to build more, because now you're starting to build systems. You're starting to rely on people a bit more. You're starting to let some other people fill some of the roles that need to be filled. And so you're taking off a couple of the hats that you were wearing. And so naturally, now you're going to free up some time and some bandwidth that you can start expanding a bit, right? So that's great. But it has a limit. Because again, you can only manage so much. The business is still reliant upon you. And so the next level is the COO, or the Chief Operating Officer. And so that's where you now are stepping outside the business. The business doesn't necessarily rely on you to run anymore. You've built a machine at this point. You built a machine that can run itself. Now, you still need to have input. You still need to have interaction with it. I guess maybe think of it like a car, right? You still need to drive the car. The car will run on its own, but you still need to drive it. So that's maybe a way to think of it. So now you can take on a lot more, because now you have this machine that just requires your input and your guidance, but not your day-to-day being the one to handle and run everything. So now you can really grow and grow and grow. And that is, you can get to a really high level as a COO. So it's the limit for DIY. Maybe the ceiling is here, right? Then you get to project manager and maybe it's here. You get to COO level, and now maybe it's way up here, but it still has a limit, right? Because it still does rely on you to some degree. And so the final level, and again, this is from Brandon Turner, was the architect. And the architect is the person that they have the vision. They say, okay, this is the machine that I want to build. This is what it's going to do. This is how it's going to work. But they're not going to build it, and they're not going to run it. They're going to have the COO build it and run it. And they're going to have project managers that run it, right? And they're going to have the DIY people that have to do the tasks and that type of thing. So it all rolls downhill. And once you get to that architect level, now there really is no limit, right? Because all you're doing is you're building the vision. You're creating the vision, and you're creating that you're giving the guidance, and then you're handing it off. You're handing it off to the executors, the one who are going to be able to build it and run it.
Hey guys, it's Brenna Carl, CEO and co-founder of The Mortgage Shop. When I'm not spending my time searching for the best pizza in town, working out, well, because of pizza, or fighting sharks as Cale likes to say, I spend my time educating clients on the best investment products that will help them build generational wealth and making sure their loan process is as smooth as warm butter on a piece of toast. Call us today to get started with your investment journey at 800-816-7982 or, to talk more about pizza. Talk to you soon.
And so you can just come up with visions and machines and machines and machines, because all the machines run and drive themselves. And so that's the level that we all attain to, right? Or want to attain to. And just again, using this from Brandon's example, he was saying that up until the point, or really when he started what's now his Open Door Capital, his fund, he was operating at more or less a COO level. And once he got a little bit into Open Door Capital up and running and operating, he realized he had to transition. He transitioned into the architect level, which is where he feels he's at now. And he said, since then, things have just expanded exponentially. And it's because now he's the one who can have the vision. He has the experience. He can have the vision, and he can hand off and say, hey, you build it. You run it. I'm going to focus on the bigger picture, how to grow, how to scale, how to expand, what the vision's going to be, the purpose, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where we all want to get to, right? But that is a process, that is a journey. And I'll tell you, at least for me, that it is difficult. So like I said, I started out in DIY for sure. And to some degree, I'm still in DIY, right? I feel like at this point, I am in the project manager level to some degree right now. Like I said, I still probably have some things that I'm too DIY on, but I say for the most of it, or probably most of it, I'm in the project manager level right now, and working on growing that more and solidifying that, and actually in the process of building out my team with the goal for this year to become more of at the COO level, because I recognize that this has limits. Like at the DIY level, certainly I can see the limits. At the project manager level, I can certainly see the limits because it is still very heavily dependent upon me. And there's only so much bandwidth that I have to be able to do things, and even just mentally to have the bandwidth to focus and take yourself out of the weeds and to be able to see the bigger picture. Because when you're in that DIY and even project management level, you are stuck in the weeds to some degree. And so it's hard to see the bigger picture and make that vision and that goal so that you can grow. And so that's where I find myself right now, is probably working on extracting myself as close to 100% out of the DIY as possible, solidifying in that project management level and building that team with the goal of getting out to the COO level, hopefully this year, by the end of this year. That is really the goal, so that I can grow and expand and really focus more on the mission and the vision. And that's one of the other things too that I wanted to touch on here today, is having a mission for what you're doing. We talk about starting a business, and you need a strong why, right? You need a strong why for starting a business, because it's going to be tough, right? And you're going to need something strong to be able to fall back on to keep you going. And that's 100% true. And I think it's similar in the stages though with that. You need that strong why in the beginning, 100%. And you still need a strong why throughout, right? But at some point you need more, right? And that why is going to change too throughout time and as things go. But you're going to need more than the why, right? You're going to need a vision and a purpose and a mission, right? And I was talking with a gentleman today who's going to be an upcoming guest on the show, and I love his mission, right? He started out in real estate, not to be a real estate investor, not to just build up a portfolio and I've got so many doors, et cetera. But he started it out as a means to an end of his mission. And I'm not going to spoil everything with his mission because I think it's really very great what he's doing, but it's a very, very God-oriented, very mission-oriented mission that he has, and utilizing real estate to support it. But everything that he does with his investing and building a business, he has it in mind as, again, a means to an end. This is going to allow me to further this end goal, this mission. So I'm excited to dig into it some more on the show here coming up shortly. But I think that's where we can fall into a trap again. So not only with getting stuck in these different levels of entrepreneurship, but getting stuck in I don't know if maybe trap, maybe that's not appropriate, though I think it certainly can be, maybe on the treadmill or the rat race, again, of just wanting to build more and consume. So we just want more and more. I want to have more doors, more revenue. When is enough, right? When is enough? And that is a hard question because I think left to our own devices, the continual struggle of the spirit versus the flesh, our flesh is going to say it's never enough, right? That's one of the great lies the devil likes to tell us is there is never enough. And it's very easy to get sucked into that, especially with social media and everything. And you're comparing yourself to these people, look at where they're at and where I'm at and this, that, and the other thing, right? So it's very easy to get sucked into this and just get into this rat race of, okay, I just got to keep building more. I got to keep getting more doors because that's what you do. And we don't have a real purpose or a real mission behind it. Besides, perhaps I want to make more money. But what is that going to do? What is the money going to do? And I think that's where we all need to take, myself included, where we need to take a step back and think, what is that going to do? What is the end goal of that? There was a movie that I was turned on to recently and I watched on Netflix, or no, it was on actually Amazon Prime. I think everybody should watch. Very good. True story. It's called, I think it's just called Mully, M-U-L-Y. Very cool story. It's about this guy. He's still alive. Kenyan gentleman who grew up on the street. He was abandoned as a child. He grew up on the street. He got taken in by this wealthy family, got a job, eventually started his own business and then multiple businesses and going through those different levels of entrepreneurship. Actually, now that I think about it, you can see it in his story. Built all these businesses and then had a revelation from God one day after becoming a multimillionaire, having a revelation from God where he wanted to help the street kids, the same that he used to be when he was younger. And he came home and he had 8 children. It's crazy. A really awesome story. He had 8 children and he came home one day and he said to everyone at dinner, I'm never going to work for money again. We're going to help these street kids. And he sold all his businesses, sold everything. And this guy had a lot of business. It's pretty intense. He sold everything. And they just he started going out into the streets of Kenya in the middle of the night. They're dangerous to do as well. Middle of the night, finding these orphan kids on the street, taking them to his house. And they just got all these children into their house. And then they had to build an addition to their house to get more kids. And then they had to get land and build house. It's just this crazy story. Lots of miracles along the way and totally faith-filled, which is amazing. But you just see this, you see this difference. He built all these businesses. He got to that architect level, more or less. But he didn't have a purpose. He didn't have a mission. And so he was just building more and more, consuming more and more. I think they said he used to change his car like every 3 or 4 months, Mercedes, Audi, this, that, the other thing. It was just consuming more and more. And I think that's where we find ourselves oftentimes as entrepreneurs or real estate investors. It's very easy to get sucked into that. And then he had that vision and completely changed his life. And I'm not saying everything is going to be that radical, right? It doesn't need to be. It's going to be whoever God calls it to be. And he's had a humongous impact, right? Like over 12,000 kids and growing that he's saved and had an impact on through this endeavor. So totally incredible. But yeah, so what is our purpose, right? Because that's how that came about. He found a purpose and he found a mission that was given to him by God. And so what is our purpose? What is our mission as entrepreneurs, as investors? When is enough? What is the ends that we are striving to achieve through the means of our investing and our entrepreneurship and our businesses? Do we have? I think when we find that, then the answer to when is enough becomes clear. Until we find that, we can be stuck on that treadmill or that rat race. And so it's a challenge that I put out there for myself and for the Fit Investor community to think about it. When is enough? What is your purpose? What is your mission? What can you do with the wealth that you're building? How can we use that to have a kingdom impact in this world? Not just be consumers, but be contributors to the kingdom. That can come in any number of ways. So I put that challenge out there. And I'd love for, after listening to this episode, I'd love for people to comment in the Facebook group, whether it's on the YouTube or wherever here, comment and share maybe where you're at. Yeah, if you don't have a mission or a purpose or a goal, that's totally fine. I think most people don't. I'm searching for it right now. But I think it's super important because I think then we're going to find a full other level of meaning to what we are doing and what we are building. That's going to be so much more rich and rewarding, right? Than just getting more doors, getting more revenue, getting more income. And so I'd love to hear your guys' feedback on what you may be thinking about, hopefully praying about. And if you're not, please do and share that. And let's look at this as a community, as a Fit Investor community. And maybe that's another thing too. What is the purpose and the mission of the Fit Investor community? What is the kingdom impact of that? This podcast started out as wanting to provide a platform, platform for initially real estate investors, but entrepreneurs overall, to have an open platform to speak about Christ. So for successful entrepreneurs to have a platform to openly speak about Christ. That's what this started out as. I saw the need in the real estate investing community and I wanted to provide that. And that's where it started and where I think it still is and one of its big missions and goals. And for me to be able to use whatever platform that God gives me, whether it be big or small, to bring glory to him in one way, shape, or form. All right. So I think it still has room to grow. Absolutely. I think it has room to grow in terms of what we can do as a community. There's some ideas out there for perhaps a mastermind or mission service-oriented mastermind trips. Right. I think that would be a great thing as a Fit Investor community. We can make an impact in person, physically, and financially. So some things in the works there, and love to hear people's ideas if they have some suggestions as well. So all this to say, think about where you are, not only in the entrepreneurship stages, but perhaps in the mission and purpose stages. Because I think these two things are really going to drive where you go and where you grow from here on out. And so these things have just been on my heart and on my mind here lately. And again, hearing that podcast this morning, I was like, oh yeah, that's perfect. That kind of puts a bit of a structure to what I've been thinking about. So I wanted to share that with you guys. Hope you found it helpful. I hope you like this solo episode and hope you didn't get tired of hearing me talk. And please do share your comments in the Facebook community. And yeah, we'll see you guys again on another episode. Take care.